What's good? How y'all doing this evening? Welcome back to another edition of the Don's Favorite here on Forever I Love Atlanta Sports Podcast. It's your boy the Don, back with another GM search. This time, this is a highly rumored name, Rick Smith. He is a former Houston Texans General Manager from 2006 to 2017. I brought on the guy who knows Rick Smith very well, Mac Weston. What's good, man? How you doing this evening?
I'm doing great today, Don. How about yourself?
Doing good, man. I can't complain, man. Thank you for coming on, man. Let everybody know who you are and where they can find you.
Yeah, I'm at Weston. I write over at the Houston Texans SB Nation site, Battle Red blog, and I also run the podcast as well too over there. It's called Battle Red Radio, and on Twitter I'm at Matt double underscore Weston, and I write about the NFL and the Houston Texans more specifically, and I've been kind of like slogging my way through the last 2 months or so of the NFL season after Houston kind of start 0-4, and it's been one of those down, very sad seasons as it's kind of been Atlanta as well too.
Yeah, I feel you. When the team ain't doing good, man, you find something else to talk about that just that way you won't go and slip into depression.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's been fun watching the entire league and kind of focusing some other things that are interesting to me, but it has been a bummer to watch like Deshaun Watson's fourth year be completely wasted by the poor decisions they made this previous offseason and some really disastrous one possession luck that kind of swung the other way.
Man, Bill O'Brien just left y'all in a bad situation, man. Like, and yes, y'all have a losing record, and you have a losing record, you optimistic about the off season because of draft picks. Well, y'all not even getting the first round draft pick because y'all traded y'all first round draft pick to Miami.
Yeah,
Miami's
both of
getting
them. Two of them, they're missing their first two draft picks because of Laramie Tunsil, and the Dolphins will pick in the top five as well too. And they've been very good. They've been like good enough on offense even without Tunsil. And left tackles are important, but they're not that important. They're not worth $25 million a year and two first round picks and a second round pick.
exactly. You can just draft one, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But hey, look, we all going through it, man. But hey, just stick it. Hey, so if you're new to the channel, you already know what to do. Hit that subscribe button. Also, hit that like button. Share this content out with Atlanta Sports Fanatics and hit us up in the comment section. As always, come holla at your hometown sports podcast. All right. So, Rick Smith, he started with you guys in 2006. That's the same year that y'all had the first overall draft pick. Now, I remember that draft, and he upset a lot of Texas fans at the time about because the hot person coming in that draft was Vince Young. Vince Young from Texas, grew up in Houston. He didn't draft him. He drafted Mario Williams. Tell me about that pick.
Yeah, at the time it was weird. I mean, I was still kind of a baby then. Like my brain wasn't fully developed whenever that NFL draft was going on. And I remember it was Vince Young, Reggie Bush, and Mario Williams were all kind of coming out at that time. And you're reading everything and you're thinking about it. All the way back then, it was like Williams is a smart pick to make and probably the most reasonable pick. And it'll provide a cornerstone defensive piece. But like emotionally, a lot of people wanted Vince Young or Reggie Bush because they were a lot more exciting and Young coming from the University of Texas having the season that he just had. A lot of people wanted him, and it was kind of similar to the 2014 draft where they selected, or yeah, the 2013 draft where they selected J.D. Von Clowney number one, but a lot of people wanted Johnny Manziel at the time, or because of that like emotional ties to him being from Texas and going to A&M, everything like that. And it turned out like Williams was the correct pick. Picking Vince Young, maybe in Gary Kubiak's offensive system would have worked out a little bit better, but they ended up finding good value at the quarterback position, Matt Schaub anyways. And they had, one really good Mario Williams year. They almost had like a year where he would have been absolutely dominant on that 2011 defense, but he got injured early on that season, and they were able to keep him in 2012 and went to Buffalo. But like at the time, that was the correct pick, and Rick Smith made the right call. And in like that first draft that he kind of ran, and there's a lot of rumors and stuff I've heard since then that was like Gary Kubiak's draft that he ran, that Rick Smith kind of came on late. He didn't really make a lot of the decisions for it. How true that is, I can't say specifically, but no matter how it played out, the right decision was taking Mario Williams instead of Vince Young or Reggie Bush at the time. No matter how excited, how emotionally invested people were in that pick at the time.
Well, here's my take on it. Like, I'm going back to the 2006 draft. All right, he and it looks like Rick Smith because I looked at his resume in first round draft picks. He's been drafting a lot of trench guys. You know, defensive end, offensive tackle. Um, you look at the guys he drafted. Like I said, Mario Williams, first overall pick. Like that's not a bad pick. I don't care what anybody say. You know, Mario Williams was the best like pass rusher in that draft. The next year they drafted not the next year, the second round they drafted D'Amico Ryans. And I'm gonna get to D'Amico Ryans in a minute because I feel like if he is gonna be the next GM for the Falcons, I feel like there's a tie to him because D'Amico Ryans is currently the inside linebackers coach in San Francisco, who's the DC out there. It's Robert Saleh. Saleh also used to coach for the Texans as well. So that's that relationship right there. But 2007, y'all drafted Omoyi Okoye. He was a defensive tackle, and then 2008, y'all drafted Dwayne Brown. Y'all drafted Brian Cushion in 2009. 2010, y'all drafted Kareem Jackson, and in 2011, y'all drafted J.J. Watt. So most of those guys they not sexy, um, like shiny nickel picks, but those was guys that they drafted and it worked well in y'all favor because that was during the good stretch and y'all had a good defense and y'all was making playoff appearances.
Yeah, like the best way I can describe Rick Smith as a drafter and evaluate talent is like I always kind of liked him as being like a pop star where he made some great hits and like he had some like really incredible songs that he had, but he had troubles like putting together an entire comprehensive album and putting together like a really good roster. And like if you go through his whole draft history with Houston, like every first round pick he nailed just about. The only big miss he had was Moby Okoye. He was 19 years old from Louisville. Never really kind of developed, like he was who he was at 19, and that allure potential never really kind of came out of him. The other pick that you could kind of describe as a bust is Kevin Johnson, the cornerback from Wake Forest, and that was like a mid-20s pick there with Kevin Johnson. But Johnson was great his first 2 years in Houston. He had some injury issues that really destroyed his career there, and like since then, like he's gone on. He started at outside cornerback with Cleveland this year, and he's been passable there. He hasn't been great at all. But like that wasn't an issue with Rick Smith's like own talent evaluation with that Kevin Johnson pick. It was more just injuries that hurt him from there. But like also as a evaluated talent, like Smith has had problems in the middle rounds. I mean, there's entire draft classes where like rounds 2 through 7, they didn't get anything at all whatsoever from there. Like the 13 class is a good example where after Jadeveon Clowney, they got nothing from the second round on. None of those players signed a second contract in that 2013 class when they're the first overall pick as well too. And so like whenever you get kind of past that first round, there's some holes. And I think you have problems like find that mix between finding athleticism and guys who know how to play football. I think they went more with like guys who showed these skills in the college game but didn't have the athleticism to back it up for the NFL. And they missed a lot of guys in kind of the middle rounds and later rounds and have problems there. But like even that being said, they did find some diamonds in the rough, like Brandon Brooks, who's an all-pro guard, Glover Quinn, who was a Pro Bowl safety, AJ Boye was like an undrafted guy that turned to something. Same thing with Arian Foster as well too. And so they did have some. And Derek Newton's another good example of a
Yeah, you got
Brooks
Brooks
Reed, and
Reed.
he
Brooks
was
Reed was
okay.
a highly
Yeah,
serviceable
he was
linebacker as well.
serviceable as a second round pick. And so like and Connor Barwin was good too. And so like he found some guys there, but overall there's just a lot missing from the rounds 2 through 7 where you need to find like at least some starters from there. And there are entire draft classes that were empty because of those holes that he had in that portion of the valuation. But first rounds, like he was excellent. He was superb and spectacular at that portion of the draft.
All right. Now, like you just said about, around second to seven, he really didn't hit that much on those picks, which, to me is a red flag for me because I like somebody who it's hard. It's hard. You're not going to hit on 100% of your picks, but if you can hit somewhere between 50 to 60% of your picks, you won your draft. You won that. You won the draft. That's just how it is for me. The Falcons situation, Thomas Dimitrov, we miss more than we hit. Yes, we drafted Matt Ryan. Yes, we drafted Julio Jones. We found a diamond in the rough with Grady Jarrett in the fifth round. We found a good pick in Jones in the second round in 2016. But most of our draft picks has just been, especially in the trenches, it hasn't been good. Yes, we drafted Lidstrom and McGarry last year, 2019, and they still haven't developed yet. I feel like they will be good. They will be great. It just all depends on who we bring it in to help elevate those guys. Because our O-line coach, Chris Morgan, is just not a good coach. That's just my opinion. Uh, we drafted Nate Matthews in 2014. He has his times that he struggles, and you look at the defensive side, the defensive line. We drafted guys like I know this is before Thomas Dimitrov, but Jamar Anderson, the DN from Arkansas,
Mm-hmm.
Pierre Jerry, Massaquoi, like those guys, they never panned out. Oh yeah, Tat McKinley, Vic Beasley, those guys. So, but I'm looking at Rick Smith. I'm like, okay, well, the people that you chose in the first round, trace players, they played well for you guys.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, and if you hit the first round, like you can build a good football team. It just kind of becomes a top heavy team where you have problems like once, if anything happens, like injury wise, you have problems with your team kind of falling apart down past that point as well, too. The other two things I want to say about Rick Smith, aside from the draft, is one, he kind of made some weird decisions in free agency and just retaining his own players. And like the three decisions I always kind of think about: one, letting Glover Quinn walk and signing Everett instead. Everett played a handful of games, was released. Quinn was a Pro Bowl player in Detroit after the fact, and he was one of the rare players that he actually drafted, in the later rounds of the draft that panned out to be a very good player. In 2016, they let AJ Boye hit free agency. He went to Jacksonville, had a Pro Bowl year there too. And that was a player that they could have franchise tagged. They chose not to at that point as well. And he was another guy who that was an undrafted cornerback who played here and there a little bit over time, eventually kind of became a starter there, was absolutely incredible in 2016. That was the best pass defense the Texans ever had. And they almost beat, New England in New England that year because of that
Yeah.
defense alone, but they lost because of, Brock Osweiler, of course. And then the third decision, of course, is all the quarterback decisions that they had. But those quarterback decisions, though, it's hard to know what was Rick Smith and what was Bill O'Brien. And so, like, I don't know if Bill O'Brien told Rick Smith, like, hey, I want Ryan Fitzpatrick. I don't want any of these quarterbacks. Or, hey, I want Tom Savage. I don't want anybody else to be drafted. Or I think Brian Hoyer can do it. Or I think Ryan Mallett can do it. Or, Brock Osweiler's my guy. Or if it came from
Oof.
ownership. But that being said, like, Rick Smith's name is still attached to those decisions. And, he's taken the responsibility and, like, the praise for training up this like Deshaun Watts. I know he was on that podcast appearance to kind of like salvage reputation some as he goes into these general manager interviews in the media. And he kind of talked about that story about how he told a story that it was pretty much his singular decision to trade for Deshaun Watson and make that pick. And that kind of overrode all those previous poor decisions at the quarterback position. And I agree with, just because he wasn't the type of archetypical quarterback that Bill O'Brien usually has and had selected before him. And Watson never really fit that mold that O'Brien usually worked with, and never was really able to develop an offense around him as well, too. And so I kind of buy that as well. But those three decisions were really kind of strange, and they really hurt Houston's defense and, of course, the offense that year in 16. And for the entire 2010s, it was kind of wasted with O'Brien because how bad the quarterback position was as well, too. But again, like I said, like Rick Smith was kind of a pop star where he had some really great hits, have troubles building an entire competent roster and cohesive roster to win a Super Bowl, but he still was able to build, consistent playoff contenders. And, if you have that over enough time, you're bound to, get lucky or hit a good streak where you're able to have a better playoff run and more playoff success than what he had whenever he was in Houston at the same time.
All right. Yeah, and that's the because what you hit on when you don't know what's Bill O'Brien and you don't know what's Rick Smith, because Bill O'Brien became young coach in 2013,
Yeah, he became a coach in 14. 13 was that
14.
year where Matt Schaub's arm deteriorated completely,
Oh
and they
yeah,
won
yeah,
2 games, lost 14 in a row. And then that was kind of weird as well, too, because usually whenever a head coach gets fired after a season like that, they never keep the general manager at all. And so it's kind of like how Atlanta's kind of go through the same thing where it's like, well, do we keep Raheem Morris after they've kind of had a second half resurgence and their defense has played a lot better? Or do we go ahead and keep him and then hire a general manager? And you really kind of see most teams kind of clean house entirely. And so it was kind of bizarre. They kept Smith and then hired O'Brien, and I don't think those two ever found any sort of like cohesiveness during the entire time they were together at all.
I think and correct me if I'm wrong. This, y'all, this is my opinion. Y'all gave Bill O'Brien too much power down there in Houston.
Yeah, I completely agree.
I know he's from that New England coaching tree, and y'all saw what Bill Belichick was doing because Bill Belichick is a general manager and a head coach. And y'all saw that and say, "Oh, well, Bill O'Brien, he spent a lot of time with Bill Belichick. He could do it here in Houston." Instead of you guys finding your own identity, because what y'all was doing was working, and y'all got to take into account too. Y'all had a good defense. Y'all had a good defense for a good long time. Then on top of that, uh, y'all didn't draft a quarterback in the first round since David Carr all the way up to Deshaun Watson. And y'all drafted what because y'all came to the league in 2000 what three
Two, 2002.
oh yeah 2002, and y'all drafted David Carr.
Yeah, it's funny hearing it like that because I haven't thought about it like that before. But yeah, like it was like a 15-year difference between whenever they drafted David Carr in 2002, and then whenever they drafted another quarterback in the first round again in Deshaun Watson. But yeah, it was Carr, and then it was Schaub, and then it was Watt, and then it was all those kind of weird decisions in 2000 in the 2010s where they drafted Tom Savage, went through all these veteran free agents that were bad. None of it worked out, and they selected him to take Watson as well too. But yeah, he was the second first round quarterback the team ever selected.
And I remember because Matt Schaub, he was the backup for Vic here in Atlanta.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I remember that 2006 offseason that y'all acquired Schaub from us. And and I was at the time I was friends with a Texas fan. I don't know how to be. Y'all was still a fresh team, young team, and I don't know how he was just a huge fan. He wasn't even an Oilers fan, but y'all had the Oilers down there, down the Tennessee Titans. But he was saying, "Oh man, we gonna draft Vince Young." I'm like, "No, y'all not drafting Vince Young." So y'all just got Matt Shaw, who can play in that Gary Kubiak West Coast offense. And I said to him that I don't feel like Vince Young will fit in that mold. I said y'all will do well. I said y'all will do well with Shaw. I feel like what y'all gonna end up doing is y'all gonna draft a running back. I was wrong. Y'all gonna draft a running back. Y'all gonna draft Richard Bush first overall. And y'all gonna have a good running back, and because I like Sharp when he was here in Atlanta. Because there were times Vic missed games and Sharp had to step in, and like I
Mm-hmm.
love what I saw. Like that was the only time we get to see an actual quarterback play in that position. Because Vic is highly athletic. But he normally did. If he did, if the first read wasn't open, he took off. I don't like personally. I don't like quarterbacks like that. I like this. You make all your reads, and if ain't nobody open, then you can take off. So, but they drafted Mario. Like I said, they drafted Mario Williams first overall. And I said, okay, well, y'all identity is going to be defense. Y'all going to try to become a defensive team because look at the AFC South at that time. You had Peyton Manning and company. You needed the defense to stop those guys. All right. You had Tennessee Titans. At that time, they moved on from for Steve McNair because they drafted Vince Young. And good thing y'all drafted, like I said, good thing y'all went defense because, like once again, you got to stop them as well. And you have the Jacksonville Jaguars, which at that time their offense wasn't that good. They had young running backs like Michael Turner and Maurice Jones-Drew at the time, but their defense was good too. In 2007, they had a good defense.
Yeah, with
So
Marcus Stroud and John Henderson, and I can't remember the name of the linebacker. I think it was Michael Peterson. But yeah, they had a really good defense in Jacksonville at that time too. The other thing I will say about Rick Smith, and one of the things that made him work well in Houston whenever he became the general manager, was that he knew what Gary Kubiak wanted. Like he worked in Denver whenever Kubiak was there, and then Kubiak went to Houston, and then he followed him after and was hard with them. But he knew what Kubiak wanted: an offensive lineman and a quarterback and a number one wide receiver. And then whenever they had problems like defensively with the staff where Kubiak really liked his defensive staff, but they were bad and continuously had bad defenses. And they got Wade Phillips and transferred that defense. And he knew what players that Wade wanted in his defense as well too. And there's a lot of talk before that JJ Watt was a Wade Phillips pick. Like Wade went to the table and kind of batted for Watt that led to that selection for that defensive transformation in 2011 as well too. And so but the one thing that worked really well about Rick Smith and Kubiak was that Smith knew exactly what players that Kubiak wanted. Kubiak was able to have that direct line of communication. They worked very well together, and they were able to build a cohesive team around that. And the team did have limitations, they never had number 2 wide receiver aside from Owen Daniels for Andre Johnson. They had problems, at the safety position. They probably could use some more athleticism with inside linebacker position. They had depth issues because they didn't draft very well from rounds 2 through 7. But all in all, if Schaub doesn't get hurt in 11, that team could maybe win the Super Bowl. In 2012, if Schaub's arm doesn't fall apart, maybe that team does more than lose in the second round too. And so again, that cohesiveness and ability to work together, know what players your head coach wants, and the ability to go out and get them was why Houston was so successful at the end of the 2000s and at the beginning of the 2010s. And then that sort of relationship deteriorated with Bill O'Brien, and those two guys never got along very well in that regard as well too. And so how many of those decisions that were poor were because of O'Brien, because of Rick Smith, I can't really say, but they didn't have that same relationship that Smith had with Kubiak during that time period. And that severance and that hiring Brian Gay and that attempt to fire him and go get Nick Caserio, really kind of derailed Texans football for the last 3 years or so. And they showed the damn burst, but it wasn't because of the decisions that Rick Smith made. Well, the Texans aren't a bad football team this year because Rick Smith made a bunch of bad decisions in 2017. They're a bad football team because of the decisions that Bill O'Brien made from 2018 on whenever he took over the entire franchise.
Exactly. Now, you talked about the relationship Rick Smith had with Kubiak, because Rick Smith did play for the Broncos. He did coach there as well, I believe. I don't know if he coached there or not, but I think he played there for Denver when they won their Super Bowls and whatnot. But this is what we talk about. When you talk about general managers, you got to talk about the relationship they have with other coaches in the league. Now, we know Kubiak right now, he's in Minnesota right now. Rick Smith is hired. There's so many possibilities that he can do to actually bring in a head coach. Because in Atlanta, we said that our general manager, whoever we hire, this is per Arthur Blake and Rich McKay, they said that whoever the GM is going to be, they're going to have their hand in choosing the head coach for this organization. And I looked at Rick Smith, and when he was in Houston, he had a tie with Kubiak. He had a tie with Wade Phillips. He has a tie with Robert Saleh. Now Robert Saleh's out there in San Francisco. Who's the head coach out there? Kyle Shanahan, Mike Shanahan's, son. And you got, like I just said, DeMeco Ryans. He's the linebackers coach for the 49ers. So it can very well be we choose Robert Saleh as our head coach, and he can bring in DeMeco Ryans as our DC. Because DeMeco Ryans hasn't been coaching that long. He just left the league in 2015. And for him to even be a coach and doing a good job out there, with that defensive unit in San Francisco is impressive in his own right. And I don't know if I remember DeMeco Ryans. He was a great player, like All Pro, Pro Bowler, linebacker for the Texans back in 2006. From that stretch to 2006 to what year did he leave, you guys?
I think it was 09. And I remember being very upset because I think they released him, and I was like, he has no idea what they're doing. They've released him and Eric Winston the same offseason, just because of salary cap reasons. And it ended up working out for Houston. They were able to make do without him. But yeah, like Ryan's, his rookie year in 06, it was funny because they drafted Mario Williams number 1 overall. Everybody was excited for him. And then that year, you're like, actually, DeMeco Ryans is the best player in this defense. And he's a better pick than Williams was. It was more impactful immediately than Mario Williams was when they were first drafted. And Ryan's had some injury issues. I know the Texans had a really bad field during that time period, and he got DeMeco Ryans hurt there. I think he got Ryans hurt again whenever he was in Philadelphia playing against Houston. I think in 2013 as well too. Whenever they made a trip, or 2014 made a trip back to Houston as well. Like he was good in Philadelphia too, and was a very good player. And it was funny too because again, like I said, like you're just taking this guy number one overall. Everybody's so jazzed up except for Mario Williams. And the season goes on, you're like, actually, D'Amico Ryans is the leader of this defense, and
Man,
he had
and
a
you
really
know
he
what?
had a really good
It's
job
very
there.
similar, exactly. Because I remember that '06 season. I'm like, yeah, this second round pick, I playing the first round pick.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why D'Amico, because D'Amico Ryan's supposed to really be the first round pick. I don't know how he slipped into the second round. I really don't know to this day. But it's very similar to Atlanta in 2016, that first year. We drafted Keanu Neal, which he played good. He did. He had some like a lot of people found out real quick about Keanu Neal, the bone crushing hits he delivered. But that second round pick, Deion Jones, I feel like he outshined Keanu Neal.
Yeah,
So
exactly, and he was healthy as well too. Like Keanu News has had a ton of injury issues, and like when he plays, he's an impact player. But just like the amount of injuries he's had, and it's funny to see Deion Jones be healthy, for his size and stature, and be able to run around, make the tackles that he's made there, and have to like lead the defense too from the inside linebacker position at his high weight instead of just being like a backside chasing tackler has been really surprising there as well too over these past few years.
all right, we'll go ahead and wrap this up here in a minute. But last thing I want to just go back and touch back on is the connections he have with other coaches in the league. We just talked about Robert Sally. Like, what's your thoughts on Robert Sally? Do you think he's ready to be a head coach?
Sally reminds me a lot of Mike Vrabel because like Sally's had one really great year running a defense, and that was last year in San Francisco, where they had Nick Bosa, Eric Armstead, DeForest Buckner, and D Ford was their worst pass rusher on their front four, and Ford had some
Exactly.
injuries here and there, and like they played cover three, and like everybody, and like they have Richard Sherman who is healthy. They played a ton of cover three, and they had, like really great coverage linebackers and Dre Greenlaw, and then Fred Warner, and like Warner's one of the best coverage linebackers in football. And like he makes that defense run. And that game last week against Arizona is a really great example of how good of a coverage linebacker that Warner is. Like his ability to carry the seam, play the hook, play the flat, kind of shut down those slant passes to DeAndre Hopkins too as well. In that Super Bowl last year in Kansas City, he was making tackles on Mecole Hardman on end rounds and those sort of things. And so like with Solly, like what his defense is. His defense isn't anything new. He hasn't done anything nobody's ever done before. He's just using this defensive system that he knows well. And whenever he has the talent, that defense works. Like he didn't do anything all that much different than what Seattle did, in
And
2012 and that sort of thing.
and
And like
that's what
he's,
scares and that what scares me because we just fired Dan Quinn and like he runs cover three as well, and like we
mhm.
still had the same talent here. I just feel like, well, if he do become a head coach, can he bring in just a DC that can run their own style? Because Dan Quinn, he forced that philosophy on this team, and it did not work. We got beat a lot. Just stand and cover three, quarterbacks finding those soft zones, and then on top of that, our GM Thomas Dimitrov, he's drafting corners and safeties who are corners who are man coverage DBs, but you forcing them to play zone, and it didn't work.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great point. And like I think Oliver's a good example of that. I think Terrell's been a really good tackler this year, but he seems more of a man coverage corner than his zone coverage corner. And like they just have problems also like passing assignments as well too. And like that defense doesn't work unless you are able to get pressure with your front four. And
Bingo.
Atlanta couldn't do that. San Francisco was able to do it last year. Like this year, like if you look at DVOA and points allowed, like their defense I think is very overrated because they have forced a high number of turnovers. And they play like an offense that's a high ball control offense where they're not facing as many possessions. But I think he's played more quarters this year, more cover one, a little bit more man coverage than previously. They've blitzed a little bit more this year too. But I don't really think he's some sort of defensive mastermind that can come in, take over a defense, put a new scheme in. And this is going to be the difference between like the Atlanta defense this year, the Atlanta defense next year. It's a talent issue. And it's kind of the same thing for Houston as well too. And so he reminds me of Vrabel to that extent. And like Vrabel's had that problem this year in Tennessee, where last year Dean Pease was defensive coordinator. He's taken over the coordinator role this year, and like his entire defense is falling apart. They won the worst defenses in football, and like he's doing this job that he probably shouldn't be doing that he took over. And like, but that being said, like Solly seems like a guy who can lead men, can manage a team that a lot of guys want to play for. You have those comments about Richard Sherman had about him. Like that sort of stuff's important, but that's just be about him as a head coach, learning how to delegate responsibility, and then working the general manager with the players that he needs to run his defense from there.
But
That's
but
possible in that way.
but my thing is, it's more for the Falcons. It's more coaching. the talent. We have the talent. Yes, you're right. We don't have a good pass rush here in Atlanta. To run a cover three the right way, you have to have guys up front to get consistent pressure. We
Mhm.
don't have that outside of Grady Jarrett. All right, the way we drafted like um, D is small. You know, like we don't have anybody like huge up on the front. That's why I said like we need to get a defensive tackle who is a mountain of a man who can command or demand double teams. So that way a guy like Grady Jerry or Jonathan Mason they can be one on one and can beat you know those matchups against linemen and get into the backfield and make plays. But yeah, like I said I kind of feel you on Sally. I just feel like if he's gonna come in, he has to be more of a CEO than actually a coach. Allow your DC to actually do what they want to do. They do best and focus on the defensive side of the ball. Because the problem with the Falcons has been defense for years, ever since we drafted Matt Ryan. Uh, we're gonna go ahead and wrap this up real quick. I got one more question. Um, if we do bring in Rick Smith, and I know this, I know first off he's not getting rid of Matt Ryan. What is your thoughts on this draft? And if he is the next GM for the Falcons, what do you think our first draft pick is going to be?
I don't watch very much college football during the year. There's only so much I have to live, and I can't spend 9 hours Saturday, 9 hours Sunday watching football. But that being said, like I think for Atlanta, like I think it would have to be about defense because you have all the offensive pieces that you need. I think it'd be interesting, if they do hire Rick Smith, like how they go from like an offensive coaching perspective, because like Ryan's, really great, one of Ryan's best years, and like the year Atlanta wins the Super Bowl was playing with Mike Shanahan, or I mean, Kyle Shanahan's the offensive coordinator. That's the outside zone. That's the play action offense. That's what Rick Smith ran. What Rick Smith had with Gary Kubiak is so Rick Smith was able to scout and find valuation for whenever he was in Houston as well too. And so they do hire Rick Smith. Like I could definitely see somebody from that same coaching tree come down, be the offensive coordinator in Atlanta. And like maybe even that becomes Gary Kubiak. Who knows? Because Kubiak may be like, I'd rather coach Matt Ryan than coach Kirk Cousins and be kind of in this dead end spot in Minnesota and maybe take his son with them. Who knows how
Yeah,
that
Clint,
could turn out? But
Clint Kubiak is like a young prodigy type of offensive coordinator that a lot of people haven't figured out yet. But I feel like somebody's gonna get this guy a chance, and I feel like Atlanta should bring him in as an OT. You can't go wrong with somebody like that. He knows everything from his dad. So
yeah, and then he also has a support system as well too. So if he's missing things and understands how things work out there as well. Like you've seen what Kubiak has done in Minnesota, where once they brought Simmons along the offense after like 3 weeks of not really kind of using him at all, that offense is taken off, and you kind of already have that blueprint of land with Julio and Calvin Ridley to run that exact same offense they've run in Minnesota, but the better quarterback play with Matt Ryan, and even I think a potential better offensive line as well too, because I think McGarry can block outside zone. I think Lidstrom can as well too. Matt can, Matthews can. Like that left guard position has been a bit of an enigma in Atlanta for the past few seasons too. But I do think if you did get Smith and you're able to find an outside zone sort of coaching tree offensive coordinator, that could be like a top 10 offense pretty easily next year. And then from there, it's just kind of like hitting your draft picks on the defensive side of the ball, maneuvering the cap to be able to create space and be able to find some actual good defensive pieces. And like you mentioned earlier, it's also like it's not only that, but it's marrying your talent to your scheme. And Atlanta's done a very bad job with that with Dan Quinn, over the past few years. And it's funny too, because like a lot of this has been masked by that second half, famous Atlanta defensive surgeons that happens every single year. It's happening in Atlanta this year. And so like if they can play like that from week 1 on instead of just like week 10 on, they turn it around. That would go a long way as well too next year. But I do think Atlanta could be the type of team who could be a playoff team next year immediately. If they hit that head coaching hire, if they hit the offense coordinator hire, and then are able to just like get more out of their already talented defensive pieces they have, if they're able to just get a better coach who's better able to marry the scheme and the talent they already have available to them.
bingo. You said everything. You said everything I've been saying for a while now. They have to get the GM right, the GM hire right, the head coaching right, and have a good draft and marry both all that together in the off season, and it's gonna show in 2021 season, and we should be in the playoffs. Like a lot of people think that this is not a bad team. You look at this talent on this team, it doesn't look like the record. I know some people say, well, we still 4-11. Okay, we get that. But players can't escape bad coaching, and that's the truth. So you bring in somebody who can coach these guys up. Some of those games that we lost this year,
Just
look what
bad
happened
luck.
yesterday. Yeah, look what happened yesterday. We should have won that game, but because of the offensive play calling that's been horrible all year long, this is why we 4-11. All right, the stubbornness of the head coach at the time, Dan Quinn, and then it transferred over to Raheem Morris. They want to continue to run this cover three and not make end game adjustments and switch it up. This is why we 4-11. So I get it. But I feel like Rick Smith come in, and you said it right. I don't think he's drafting a quarterback. Everybody, we need to get we do not need a new quarterback. Matt Ryan is fine.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think what you would need, I think one of the problems that Rick Smith did though with Matt Schaub was that there was indications in 2011. Well, after the foot injury, there was definitely indications in 2012 that Matt Schaub may be done. And rather than draft a quarterback in the third round, the fourth round, like Russell Wilson, who's available, then he didn't draft anybody, and they kept T.J. Yates as a backup, and Yates was I think he's a former fifth round pick who won a playoff game in Houston, won some big games and that sort of thing, but he wasn't like an actual franchise quarterback who can lead offense week in and week out. And so they didn't have a succession plan available. But yeah, like I think for sure, if you keep Ryan around and like you have your one possession record luck flip from this year, next year, they could be a playoff team because of that. And like you would want to draft a young quarterback in like the third or fourth round, have something set up there for the future. But I think it just really kind of comes down to, like you mentioned, better coaching. And then also like those bad lucks, like Todd Gurley not laying down the 1 yard line, touching the ball on the onside kick. Like those sort of like insane decisions and insane ways to lose games that won't be there. Next year, makes a dramatic difference in the win-loss record too. And I think Atlanta's different than like let's say Houston. Like Houston's 2-7 one-score games this year, but Houston's a bad football team aside from Deshaun Watson. I think Atlanta has the talent, and there is a good football team underneath there, but it's masked by the poor coaching, poor scheme, and then these like insane ways that only Atlanta can lose football games that have plagued them, throughout this year and like every year since that traumatic Super Bowl loss in 2015 or 16, whenever it was. I don't know.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on, man. So much. Once again, let everybody know who you are, where they can find you.
Yeah, my name is Matt Weston. I write over at SB Nation's Houston Texans website, Battle Red blog. I also run the podcast over there called Battle Red Radio. And you can follow me on Twitter, and it's at Matt_Weston. And from this point on to the rest of the year, I write an article called 10 Things where I'll write about the entire NFL as a whole. So if you need something to read whenever the postseason comes around or the last 2 weeks of the regular season, you can always stop by and read that side if you want something aside from Atlanta Falcons stuff or even Houston Texans stuff on Houston Texans website to read and enjoy.
All right. Thank you for coming on again, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on tonight.
No problem. Guys, appreciate y'all doing it live. If you're watching this at a later time, hit me up in the comment section. Let me know what you think about the rumored next GM, Rick Smith. You think that'd be a good hire? If not, tell me your thoughts about it. We about to do a show here in 3 minutes. We about to go live and talk about the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. So I'm gonna end this stream here in a minute. And then y'all stay tuned. We're gonna talk about the Peach Bowl, UGA versus Cincinnati coming up this weekend. Hey, if you're new to the channel, y'all already know what to do. Hit that subscribe button. Also, that's right, King. Stay tuned for another show coming. We coming at you. Hit that like button, share this content out with Atlanta Sports Fanatics, and hit us up in the comment section. As always, come holler. It's your Hometown Sports Podcast. It's your boy The Dunn with another episode of The Dunn's Favor, talking about GM searches. Y'all have a great evening. I'm about to end this live, going to the next live. See y'all there.